When were you in Upper Volta? Or were you in Burkina Faso?
Well, I was invited and I went to Upper Volta. And the first year it was Upper Volta, and the second year it was Burkina Faso. So it's like two countries in one, essentially.
But it's still the same place.
Yeah, it's still the same place.
What did you do? What was your project?
I was an English teacher.
And where were you?
In Waiaguia in the north, in the Sahel, which was I don't know, I'm sure I'll think about it years from now and I'll say what a great time to be in that place. It seemed like that region of Africa, not specifically the northern part of Burkina Faso, but the Sahelian regions in general were really in the news during those years because of the drought and all the relief efforts that everybody were doing, and we got to see a lot of refugees in the north, and it seemed like a really interesting time and place to be.
It's interesting that you describe it. It is interesting, and someone who's been in that situation would probably understand, but people who most Americans, I think, don't really know, other than what they see on the news of the starving refugees. What do you mean interesting?
I think interesting, I think it's going to be more interesting in retrospect, because I think a lot's being written about it, and I don't know, we always think of, the Peace Corps and everything, how it started in the early 60s, and here 25 going on 30 years later, we think that we think of the golden years way back in the 60s. I think years from now we're going to look back at right now as being the golden years of development work, because you see there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think probably the most idealistic of people back in the 60s probably thought that by the 1980s and certainly by the 1990s that a lot of that work would be wrapping up, and they could look back and they could say, look, what a great job, we all have done, but it goes on, and it probably will go on, it probably will continue for a while, and it's like a lot of other things. You think that would it have been great to be a part of this period or that period in this place, and you can't really fully appreciate the time and place that you're in. You can't really put it in any kind of perspective. But I had an inkling even when I was in Burkina from 83 to 85 that it was a special time to be there, and I thought so at the time, and I think now as a few years have gone by, just a few years, I think I was right.
Can you describe what it looked like, what it felt like to be in Waiaguia in the north at that time?
Well, what it looked like, the first impression was it was a lot different than the impression that I would eventually come to have, and the impression that I have now thinking back. It's a very brown place, at least in the north, and you get this kind of feeling like you're someplace like Dodge City, and it's dusty and dry, and then over a period of time you become so familiar with your surroundings that it just becomes home. It becomes very, very ordinary, but not in a negative way, but in a very comforting way. Whenever I left, I didn't leave Waiaguia a lot, but when I did, I thought, I got to get home. And when I thought that, I didn't mean California. I meant getting back to Waiaguia and getting back to my house and in my yard. I don't think I could have felt any more comfortable anywhere in the world right then. I had reached such a comfort level right then and there that it was home. It was, even when I traveled on my vacation and I left and I came back to the States and I went back to California and I was with my parents and my family and for about a week or so, and at the end of that week I thought the same thing. I gotta go home, and it was really a good feeling, getting back to Ouagadougou and finally hooking up with the taxi or the bus that took me back home, and then getting back and say, God, I'm just going to stay put for a while. It's good to be home.
what, 5, 6 years later, do you still have the feeling that you'd like to go home?
I do have that feeling, and I probably will. I'm thinking about it very seriously. As a matter of fact, I'm sure I'll be back there within the next 6 months.
What'll you do? What would be the things that you really want to do on a shorter visit when you don't live there?
Probably not a lot. It'll probably be enough just to be there and sit and just kind of go to some of the places that I used to go to and just hang out. And a friend of mine who was a teacher at my school in Waiguya came here this past summer, and I was thinking before he got here, I said, well, now he's coming to Washington, I got to take him to this, I have to go see that and do that. And when he got here, he was perfectly happy just sitting there and just enjoying being here. And it was enough. I didn't have to come up with any kind of, schedule of things for him to do. And I think it's the same thing for me when I go back, even if it is for just a short time. I don't think that I could go there for a short time and just hang out for a while and come back and say, why didn't I go here or go there? I think it would be enough just to sit around at the same old cafes and sweat without caring how I smell. And that's going to be that would be fun for me. I don't think that I won't have to make a list of things to do, because if I don't do anything, I'm sure I would be just as satisfying when it's over.
It's kind of a place where you just being there is enough.
Yeah, time takes on a whole nother meaning there. I mean, I could go to my classes, do my work, particularly my second year when I didn't have to worry quite as much about lesson plans and things like that. After my classes, sit on my porch, drink a mug of Kool-Aid that my mom had sent me, and read a couple of 100 pages of a book, and things that I can't get away with here because I feel guilty that I should be doing more, and I should be making better use of my time. But I could just sit and relax, and friend would come over, he'd come, sit, and then go, and there was, begin to appreciate time, and to making good use of time takes on a different meaning there. I must have read a couple hundred books. People don't think about that, about one thing that I think most returned Peace Corps volunteers have in common. They've read an enormous amount of things that they would not have normally read, and therefore they know about a lot of different things that they didn't realize that they would have cared so much about. And but I do look forward to going back, and I intend to go back.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you were there as a volunteer, you were teaching. What level were you teaching?
I taught all levels, and sometimes in the same day. It was my goal. I wanted to teach the absolute beginning level, where you're going in and you're basically, it's a lot of body language, and you're trying to, and then I wanted to teach the students who were a year away from the university. I would have enjoyed the difference. I like, it's a funny thing about teaching English, and when you teach enough levels, is that you can walk up to any student, even if he's not your student, and you don't know what level he's at, and you can say a couple of sentences to him, and you can right away determine what level they're at, and you can adjust your vocabulary to their level. And people might think it's difficult, but I really wanted to go into a beginning level class on a given day and almost do the same thing I did on the advanced level, but from a totally different perspective, because of the level of
You were teaching, so you taught all different ages of children. What are the kids like? What are the children of Burkina Faso that you were dealing with like?
Well, there are people who might contradict me, but my students and in my school were very, very well behaved. I like to think it was because I made it so interesting to them. I like to think that, and nobody will tell me otherwise, but that I made it interesting enough that they enjoyed coming to class, because I was very visual in class. And so they were very well behaved. I don't recall any discipline problems in my 2 years there. They were very serious. They were, being able to go to the lycée, go to secondary school it's a privilege there, and it's not taken for granted quite as much. There's the consequences of their failure is a lot more pronounced there than it would be here. So, and to be able to go to secondary school and finish is quite an accomplishment there, and so the stakes are a lot higher, and there are certain, in our culture, there, with the exception of maybe becoming a doctor and comparable professional occupations, you can do just about anything. No matter what your level of education is. There, it's not the case. There are certain things certain jobs you can have only if you have completed certain levels, and if you don't finish that level, and then you have to settle for these type jobs or those type jobs, and it's a big difference.
Let me just get you to react to a couple of things that many people who've lived there have talked about. What about the food?
Well, the national dish, toe, I did not like, and you were almost at the mercy a lot of times to eat, if you didn't eat that, to eat whatever was in season. But I recall eating a lot of steaks and fries and cooking in a stew, whatever I could find at the market on a given day. Food. I ate a lot of rice and beans. I don't have a lot of fond memories of the food, but then it was never one of my big priorities anyway. I was 50 pounds lighter when I was there, not because I couldn't eat well. I did eat well. It's just that it wasn't that much of a priority to me. So, and with the heat, it's just don't eat as much, and you don't think about it as much.
How about traveling? What does traveling make you think of?
Bumpy roads, long time to get wherever you're going. I didn't like to travel, not because I didn't like traveling. I just liked staying in my site. I liked being there. It was a big enough town that I wasn't like some of the bush volunteers who needed the diversions of the big city once in a while. I wasn't in a big city, but it was big enough that if I wanted a cold drink, I could get it. If I wanted food that resembled Western food, I could get it or imitate it. So I didn't travel a lot. I liked where I was. Mm-hmm. Besides, if I wasn't at home, then what would those bush volunteers do when they came to Waigria? They'd have no place to stay.